Guitar Co-op Podcasts. Great composers. Conceived and presented by Fabio Zanon. Our composer of the month of July is interesting not only for his music, but also for the discussions his music can provoke. The first thing that stands out is that Granados' music is much more often played and recorded on the guitar than on the piano. Granados never wrote a single note of music for the guitar. He was a pianist, and a very good one. Everything we hear are transcriptions or arrangements that were already being made during his lifetime, starting with Miguel Llobet. By the way, Llobet is a composer that has been already focused on one of our previous episodes. What about you? What do you think? Is it legitimate to interfere with a composer's work and deviate from what is considered the original idea? This is the intermezzo from the opera Goyescas by Granados, performed by the Barcelona Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Pablo González, and soon after played on a two-guitar transcription, performed by the legendary duo Abreu. That is a Guitar Co-op release, a historical recording that you shouldn't miss. Classical music is obsessed with the idea of authenticity. If we don't hear exactly the notes the composer wrote, there is a discomfort, a feeling that someone has defiled the sanctity of the creation. But is that really the case? In Granados' case, it seems acceptable since, being Spanish, the music he wrote for piano for the orchestra would, in theory, be inspired by the language of the guitar anyway. Well, that is only half true. It's half myth, especially because not all of Granados' works were Spanish in character. I'll leave the decision to you, listener. I invite you to listen here and in the accompanying playlist, which you can access in the description, and write in the comments which version of the works in this episode do you prefer. This is the Danza Española number 5, called Andaluza, by Granados, played by himself, a very early recording, and then played in a guitar version by myself, Fabio Zanon. That is in the album Spanish Music, that is a Guitar Co-op release. Enrique Granados frequently appears paired with his friend Isaac Albeniz. Pianists were constantly on tour. Their work is better known in guitar versions rather than the original piano versions, and both died at the same age. While Albeniz's music is more rootsy and more daring, Granados gives the impression of being poetry in musical form. It is more urban and more refined. Enrique Granados y Campiña was born in Lleida, in western Catalonia, on July 27, 1867. His father was an army colonel and his mother came from Santander in Cantabria. Shortly afterwards, the family moved to Tenerife in the Canary Islands, where his father was appointed the military governor. This is the dedication from Cuentos de la Juventud by Granados, here performed by Alicia de la Rocha, and again performed by myself in guitar transcription. The family stayed on the island for almost 4 years. Granados was a very impressionable child and referred to the orange and lemon orchard he managed to see from his window as the paradise of my childhood. In 1874, the family moved again, this time to Barcelona. There, from the age of 5, he showed an intense inclination for music and initially studied with musicians from military bands and then with the pianist Francisco Javier Journet, and later with one of the Barcelona's best known teachers, Juan Bautista Pujol, whose emphasis on sonority and technical clarity was legendary. Granados did not attend schools. He was homeschooled due to his very fragile health, which left him a lot of time to dedicate freely to music. He won a piano competition playing music by Schumann, the composer we heard in our previous episode, and he met Felipe Pedrell, who was the mentor of his generation of Spanish composers, with whom he apparently did not get along that well. This is the Spanish dance number 2, Oriental, by Granados, performed first by Alicia de la Rocha at the piano, and later on a 2-guitar transcription played by Aniello Desiderio and Zoran Dukic, a very beautiful transcription that is released by GuitarCoop as well. Granados' professional life began as a private tutor and as a pianist in a very sophisticated cafe the Café de las Delicias, where customer approval was very important. He had to improvise on popular melodies, which was a big influence on his style. Realizing that he had exhausted what he had to learn in Spain, he went to Paris at the age of 20 with the goal of studying at the famous conservatory. Unfortunately, upon arriving in Paris, he contracted typhoid fever. When he recovered his health, he had already exceeded the age allowed to enter the conservatory. He then began taking private lessons with Charles de Berriot, who was at the time also the teacher of nothing less than Ravel, and Ricardo Vinhas, who was to become also a very famous pianist. Berriot was fanatical about the quality of sound and demanded that his students learn improvisation. That suited Granados perfectly. This is Alicia de la Rocha performing Granados Vascongada. You can listen to that in the playlist that accompanies this episode. The cultural environment in Paris permeated Granados. He became a cosmopolitan. He attended the inauguration of the Eiffel Tower, and he lived amidst the musical controversies between the more academic field of Saint-Saëns in opposition to a more experimental field led by Debussy, Fauré, and Dukas. Granados and Vinhas enjoyed the good life. They rode bicycles, they frequented cabarets, and socialized extensively. After 2 years, disappointed by the publisher's refusal to publish his first works, he returned to Barcelona. Alicia de la Rocha playing the Spanish dance number 1, the Danza Galante by Granados, and then the same piece is performed by Manuel Barrueco on the guitar. Back home, he published his first major work, the 12 Spanish Dances, which are, to this day, one of his most popular works. In fact, if Granados had written nothing but the 12 Spanish Dances, he would still be remembered today. Saint-Saëns, Fauré, and Grieg praised in the press these truly special pieces. There are many elements that can explain the popularity. First of all, the quality of the ideas. They all have exceptionally beautiful melodies and rhythmic figures that stick to the ear. The references to folk dances are highly refined. The aroma is always present, but it dominates more through seduction than coercion. And above all, Granados makes short ideas gradually repeat and roll around themselves, to spin around themselves, as if they were a kind of a circle dance, which gently stuns and envelops the listener. This produces the effect of a childhood memory that spins incessantly and returns to the adult's mind. They are works in a kind of spiral form. This is the Spanish dance number 10, Danza Triste, by Granados, played by Alicia de la Rocha, and then played on the guitar by myself in a transcription initially made by Miguel Llobet and then revised by myself. Soon after his return, Granados gave an important concert at the Teatro Lírico in Barcelona, and the success of which brought him enormous popularity that only grew until the end of his life. At the time, he got married to Amparo Galen Lloberas, with whom he would have 6 children. He tried for a teaching position at the Madrid Conservatory, but once again, health problems marred his intentions and caused him to lose the deadline for the competition. Thus, he returned to Barcelona, continued composing and playing chamber music, and he made friends with the guy who would become one of the most important cello players in history, that is Pablo Casals. There, he also began composing for orchestra in pieces such as the Suite on Galician Songs. This is La Fiesta from Suite de Cantos Gallegos by Granados, played by Barcelona Symphony Orchestra. One of the greatest triumphs in that era was the premiere of the Valses Poéticos, Poetic Waltzes, a work that is now better known in its guitar version. They were written in Paris as part of a collection called Love Letters, but this version truly reminds us of the sentimental elegance of Schubert's dances, while he also manages to create a kind of emotional journey through the dialogue between the miniatures in the manner of Schumann. And you, what do you prefer, the original or the guitar version? This is a fragment of Granados' Valses Poéticos performed by the composer himself, and then in a 2-guitar version made by Sérgio Abreu, here performed by the duo Siqueira Lima. Back in Barcelona, due to his popularity, Granados founded his own series of chamber music concerts, and also the Granados Academy, that was a piano school intended to perpetuate his vision of the piano playing. Among the students of the academy were Paquita Madriguera, who would become the wife of guitarist Andrés Segovia, Conchita Badia, who also became very famous, and Frank Marshall, who, in spite of his English name, was also Catalan, and he would later take over the direction of the school after Granados' death. He would later be the teacher of the greatest Spanish pianist in the century, Alicia de la Rocha. Alicia de la Rocha playing Allegretto from the Romantic Scenes by Granados. At that time, Granados also became involved with the creation of the Catalan Orfeon Catalan. It was a choral society for which he would later write several works. He also wrote an opera, Maria del Carmen, which is now forgotten. These events are partly explained by the cultural ferment of Catalonia at that time, which is often called the Renaixença. It was a modernist movement in which Catalonia tried to distance itself, culturally speaking, from the decadent Spanish kingdom, which had just lost the colonies of Cuba and the Philippines. Granados considered Maria del Carmen one of his best works, a work that is very much influenced by Wagner's concepts. This is a fragment of Maria del Carmen, the first opera by Granados. A little known work, but one that is among Granados' best, dates back to this relationship with the Orfeon Catalan. It is called The Song of the Stars, and is a kind of a piano concerto with organ and two choirs. It's one of the most extravagant piano concertos ever, actually. The text is in Catalan and is a dialogue with the poetry of the German Romantic poet Heinrich Heine. Douglas Riva on piano, accompanied by Voices of Ascension, the choir Voices of Ascension, performing Cant de las Estrellas by Granados. This piece was premiered at the newly opened Palau de la Música in Barcelona on the same night as the premiere of the Goyescas, a suite for piano played by the composer himself. Granados had a fascination for Francisco Goya, the great 18th century Spanish painter, especially with the refined atmosphere he so well portrayed in his works. By the way, Granados owned several of Goya's works, and being a good draftsman, he portrayed himself in Goya's style. Granados has at least three major works inspired by Goya's universe. This Goyescas is a suite subtitled Los Majos Enamorados, which is an extremely refined work where a common motif runs through all 7 pieces inspired by Goya's neoclassical works. Some believe the work as a whole is a bit repetitive, but Granados was so successful when he premiered that in Paris in 1914 that he received the Légion d'honneur, the Legion of Honor from the French government in recognition for his compositional talent. Los Requiebros, which is one of the movements from Granados' Goyescas, here played by Alicia de la Rocha. The other work is the series of 10 songs called Tonadillas, which were written to rather insipid verses by Fernando Periquet. The verses evoke the Madrid atmosphere of tapestry cartoon series and Goya's Caprichos. The music is something to take to a desert island, one of the most inspired series ever written in Spanish language. Soprano Pilar Lorengar, accompanied by Alicia de la Rocha, singing La Maja de Goya by Granados. And after that, we hear the guitar version made by Miguel Llobet, which is performed by myself, Fabio Zanon, on the GuitarCoop album Spanish Music. Finally, the success of the Goyescas in Paris was so great that the Paris Opera commissioned Granados to write an opera on the same subject. He used practically the same music, and he commissioned Periquet to write a libretto specifically to preserve the melodies. It is one of his best works, but of course, the music is very charming. The problem is that World War I began, and the Paris Opera had to cancel the performance. Therefore, the Metropolitan Opera in New York offered to stage the premiere. Thus, Granados and Amparo set sail on a ship bound to the United States. By the way, the guitarist Miguel Llobet also traveled with them. The journey was full of setbacks because of the war and the bad weather in the Atlantic. In the middle of the trip, they wrote back to their children, saying that they were hugging each other in terror during the storms and were afraid that they would never see each other again. This is a fragment of the opera Goyescas, here performed by the National Orchestra of Spain, conducted by Ataulfo Argenta. Once in New York, they had an intense schedule. Granados played concerts with Casals, supervised rehearsals, and was pampered on all sides with cocktails and receptions. The premiere in January 1916 was a huge success, and President Wilson invited him to a reception at the White House. Because of this reception, they had to postpone their return and embarked a few days later on a ship bound for England, covered in glory. After spending a few days in London visiting friends, they embarked to Dieppe, from where they would take the train back to Barcelona. During the crossing of the English Channel, the ship was torpedoed by a German submarine and broke in half.
Porque
This is La Maja Dolorosa by Granados, sung by Pilar Lorengar, accompanied by Alicia de la Rocha. Granados and Amparo jumped into the water. According to eyewitnesses, Granados was still hoisted up by a lifeboat, but seeing that Amparo was struggling in the water, he jumped back in an attempt to save her. Both sunk and died, along with 80 other passengers. The Orfeón Catalán, in return for Granados' friendship, sent messages to embassies and musical societies around the world in an attempt to raise funds for the maintenance of the 6 orphan children. Granados was a friendly, cheerful guy, full of friends, intelligent and funny, the opposite of the stereotype of the total genius in music. Villanesca, Spanish Dance No. 4 by Granados, played first by Alicia de la Rocha on piano, and then, on my own transcription for the guitar, Fabio Zanon. If you search for recordings of Granados' music on streaming services or in catalogs, you will notice that the vast majority are by Spanish or Latin American artists. The situation isn't much different in live concerts, with the problem exception of guitar recitals. One can understand that in vocal works because, of course, people have to be familiar with Spanish or with Catalan. But is there anything that prevents instrumental works by a Spanish composer to be well played by someone belonging to another culture? This is El Pelele by Granados, played by Rosa Torres Pardo. I've seen a video blogger recently, and he said something that is very wise. There's nothing wrong with classical music, but the environment, the envelope around classical music is very problematic because it accumulates centuries of ethnocentrism, colonialist mentality, and cultural chauvinism. One of these preconceived ideas is national determinism. It's the spurious idea that being born in a certain piece of land automatically makes a person more qualified to better understand the music that was written in the same piece of land. Thus, German players would play German music better than others, and the same with French musicians with French music, Russian musicians with Russian music, and so forth. We Brazilians always make this big mistake. We always assume that Europeans or Oriental people are not qualified to play our music because they would miss the flair, the swing, and the rhythmic feeling.
Fui
This is Amor y Odio by Granados, Love and Hatred, sung by Pilar Lorengar, accompanied by Alicia de la Rocha. Of course, none of that is true. A Frenchman has no more genetic authority to play Ravel than a Chinese person. The only advantage, besides the language, is having grown up in an environment where the popular music that inspired that type of music is listened to more frequently. There's nothing that we cannot research even online nowadays. Thus, living surrounded by samba or country music makes someone more qualified to play Villa Lobos. How much of Villa Lobos' musical universe actually persists in the music consumed in Brazil today? And the same is valid for pretty much any kind of music. But the fact is that Hispanic music and music from the Americas are still seen by many as something different, which is a disguise for the term ethnocentrism. The great Dutch conductor Bernard Haitink, whom I admire very much, in a surprising obtuse statement, said that he had no interest in composers of national color, such as Manuel de Falla. Well, a giant like Falla being reduced to local color, what about Beethoven or Brahms or Wagner? Are they less national just because they are German? Would some Germanic composers like Bruckner or Schumann be called provincial because of that? Ibn al Pinar from the cycle Canciones Amatorias by Granados, sung by Pilar Lorengar, accompanied by Alicia de la Rocha. Because of this, great performers tend to avoid this type of music, and we lose a lot because of it. Just listen to the few recordings that the Polish pianist Arthur Rubinstein made of Granados music. I've seen myself a concert with Ivo Pogorelic, the great Croatian pianist, playing a few of Granados dances, and it was just unforgettable. The one piece by Granados that is extensively played by international pianists, almost always as a kind of chic encore, is this Quejas, or The Girl and the Nightingale, from the Goiescas. Arthur Rubinstein playing La Maja and el Ruiseñor, The Lady and the Nightingale, from Goiescas by Granados. Listening to a non-native playing this music confronts us with a point of view that is not biased by convention. In this case, I think that we have a gain by hearing a kind of musical accent. Because whenever Spanish music is mentioned, everyone will always say that we have to remember Segovia and Pepe Romero playing that on the guitar, Victoria de los Angeles as a singer or Pilar Lorengar, or overwhelmingly the pianist Alicia de la Rocha. Knowing Alicia's recordings is the minimum homework for anyone who wants to play or understand anything about Granados and most Spanish composers. this is Zapateado from the 6 pieces on popular songs by Granados, performed by Alicia de la Rocha. What about yourself? What do you think? Are transcriptions a worthy musical product that sheds a different light on songs, or are they a disrespect to the quality of the original? Leave your comment here on YouTube or on social media. Granados, Spanish Dance Number 5, Andaluza, played by the cellist Pablo Casals, accompanied by Nikolai Mednikov. And with that, I'll just say goodbye to you, and not before acknowledging Enrique Caldas' technical works and Monicky Zaczéski management of this series. I hope you're enjoying our episodes. Listen to the previous ones, and I hope that you can come to the August episode of Great Composers. Goodbye. Guitar Co-op Podcasts. Great Composers. Conceived and presented by Fabio Zanon.